So you have to use books to write a paper, and you're feeling a little intimidated. Where do I begin? How do I find the right ones? And how on earth can anyone expect me to read through all these pages in just a couple days? Well, I'm Dr. Jason Hansen of Furman University, and I'm here to help. In this video, we'll discuss how to find the right sources quickly, as well as how to use them efficiently and effectively. Pro tip: if you're reading every word of a nonfiction book in order to write a research paper, you're doing it wrong. Because an important part of being a good researcher is using your time as efficiently as possible. But before we get into all that, just a quick thought about why using books is so important. After all, you already know how to use the Google. You can look at Wikipedia, or websites, or even journal articles. Why not use those? They're so much shorter, right? Obviously, one answer is that web sources can be unreliable. Just because someone posted something on xhistory.com doesn't necessarily make it accurate. Of course, there are some reputable sites run by institutions and academics, so what's wrong with these? If I wanted to take things a step further, why not look in databases or published journals for articles? Again, you might reason, reading 12 to 15 pages in an article is probably going to be a heck of a lot easier than combing through all those pages in a book. I get where you're coming from. But the problem is that all these sources we've discussed so far lack depth. There's only so much information one can pack into an encyclopedia entry on the Holocaust or the Industrial Revolution. By definition, short articles have to be, well, short. And while that can be useful for gaining an overall sense of what the subject of the article is, it doesn't provide us with the details we need to build a truly convincing argument. I'll talk about this more in another video on how to argue effectively. But basically, the more specific you are in terms of the things you're talking about, the more authoritative you will sound and the more convincing you will be to your audience.
Recent research has shown that empirical evidence for globalization of corporate innovation is very limited. And as a corollary, the market for technologies is shrinking. As a world leader, it's important for America to provide systematic research grants for our scientists. I believe strongly there will always be a need for us to have a well-articulated innovation policy with emphasis on human resource development. Thank you.
Strong arguments are based on details. And details are the very thing encyclopedias try to leave out in their quest for brevity. So books can be really helpful. And here the format isn't what's important, whether it's an e-format or a physical format. Again, it's the amount of detail that the books can provide. Okay, so now you know why using books in research is so important. But how do you find the right ones? If you're in high school or college, the easiest way to find a source is through your library. Most libraries today start with a centrally located search bar, something similar to Google. Enter a term, and it will search through the various books, articles, and sometimes even videos to find the things that you need. You can look under keyword if you're not exactly sure what you're looking for, or you can use title and author to narrow things down. So let's say we're writing a paper about the history of business in France. We enter our search term here, Business History France, and we hit search, and voila, we're going to get back a number of results that might help us. Easy peasy, right? But take a deeper look. Once we start looking at the specific sources it's pulled up, we might find that they are more helpful or less helpful. The first result that this search pulled back, for example, is a specific history of something called the Parisian Gas Company. Maybe that's really helpful to the paper that we want to write. Maybe that's too specific. Take a look at the date as well. This book is over 30 years old. Maybe there are more recent things that have been said about the history of business in France over the past 30 years. What about the second one? The second result is a video just called France. Who is this aimed for? How much detail is there? Do they really even talk about business a lot? We could click on the link to investigate further, but if you notice, we have over 610 results to go through based on our little Boolean search here. Keep scrolling down, we find economic surveys from 2015, We find something about the politics of French business, but this is only for the period right before and during World War II. We find more about the big business and the wealth of nations. This is from a conference proceeding. This could be highly specific. This could be very widely spread. How on earth are we supposed to know what's actually useful here? And so this is one of the great challenges of searching. It's not just putting something into Google or into a search bar. Sometimes you have to know a little bit more clearly what exactly you're looking for. So how do I make my search more efficient? And what happens if I can't find any useful results? The best way to solve the problem of not being able to find anything is to either narrow or broaden the search term that you're using. Let's go back to our catalog for an example. So for this example above, let's say we're getting too many specific results here, we're not sure how to proceed. What if instead of searching for France business history, we just looked for a general history of France? So I'll put in history of France, and we'll see what comes back. Notice now we're starting to get books that are just general histories of France. And it is quite likely that within several of these books, they are going to discuss, in a general sense, many of the major economic events that took place, some of the particular people that were important in the history of the French economy, maybe some innovations that took place. And if you click on the link, many times it will show you a list of the table of contents. It will give you an idea of some of the things that are in here. For example, this book by John Julius Norwich, A History of France, you'll notice quite a bit of it is about the Middle Ages. If you're writing a long scope paper, if you want to know about economics in the medieval or even the early modern period, this could be a very useful book for you. If you're trying to write about 20th century French economic history, this is probably not going to be so helpful. As you can see, only 2 chapters really deal with the 20th century. The other thing we can do, of course, is to look more narrowly, focusing on a particular figure or development. So again, if we're writing this paper about the history of business in France, let's try to type in a specific term, such as the Bon Marché. This was one of the first department stores in Europe. And voila! Now we can see a book about the Bon Marché, about the culture, about the department store itself. It's a nice history. It's going to cover a lot of the different time periods that we might be looking at. And so now we found a source that could really be useful to our paper. Obviously, there's a lot of different directions one can go in here. But the key thing that I want you to remember is that if you get stuck, change the search terms. Make them more narrow, make them more broad, and you'll find more and more information that will be useful to your paper. Okay, so you're feeling a bit better about the process of searching for books for your paper. But what happens if I don't already know a specific term to search for? We just used the example of the Bon Marché. My guess is most of you had no idea what that was before I mentioned it. In the second part of the video, I'm going to teach you a couple sort of shortcuts, if you will, to find specific information that you can use for your papers. The first of these shortcuts is a little surprising because I'm actually going to praise Wikipedia for a moment. Now, hopefully, most of you have already been told, don't use Wikipedia for your papers. Wikipedia is an open source encyclopedia. There are often errors in it. A lot of times people will leave things out. Sometimes when you are giving history, you can provide a certain interpretation or misinterpretation. So Wikipedia is not a reliable source for basing your paper off of. However, Wikipedia can help us get a better idea of some of the general terms associated with whatever it is we're looking for. If I am trying to find out more about religious dissent in Germany in the 16th century, if I go and look at a Wikipedia stub related to that area, I may be able to find out who are some of the major figures. Martin Luther may be someone that you already know, but Martin Luther is one of many people involved in the Reformation. So who else could be there? Another thing we can do is mine Wikipedia for references. Basically, we can use it to find out what are some of the major books or articles on a topic that have already been written, and then we can go look up those specific items in our library using the catalog as we saw before. So let's check it out. Here we go to Google, type in Reformation, Germany, Wikipedia. Here's my article entry, and you'll see on the left-hand side we have references, we have a bibliography, and we have further reading. If I click on these, it will take me to a section that lists a number of books, recent, some of them old, some of them might be useful, some of them not, right? This one is first edition 1958. It's kind of a classic, but also a little bit dated. Maybe we'd want something more recent. Or maybe if you're looking at the historiography of the Reformation, that could be really useful. The point is that there are all of these links, all of these books already identified for you so that you can just go and put them into your catalog at your library and find them or order them very easily.
Elementary, my dear Watson.
Another trick is just to do a Google search for bibliographies related to the topic that you're researching. Let's say you had to write a paper about the Holocaust, but had no idea where to begin. Simply open up the Google, type in Holocaust with the word bibliography, hit enter, and now we have a long list of reputable associations and institutions that will give you a sense of what are some of the major works on the Holocaust. For example, I run down here, I find Library of Congress, click on it, and now I have a list of major works that have been written. Now, of course, you can go through these various databases, you can go through the various bibliographies. They'll be different. Some will have more recent things, some will focus on specific items related to the Holocaust. But again, if some of these things are interesting, I can say, okay, I want to find Collected Memories by Christopher Browning. I might say, okay, I know Christopher Browning has written about the Holocaust. Maybe I can just do a search for him as an author and see what other books he's written. The idea isn't that there's one particular website to go to find book recommendations. Rather, it's the idea that you can use these strategies to find the specific books most related to your project. Finally, don't forget that your teacher, professor, or librarian is also a resource. Many of them actually include information about further reading on their syllabi or occasionally on course websites. And even if that doesn't work, it never hurts to ask. Okay, so you found a number of great books about your topic. But let's be honest about something. Most people don't feel anxiety about looking for books, they feel anxiety about using them. This is perfectly understandable. We live in a fast-paced world where students have more and more commitments every day, whether they're extracurricular, whether they're athletic, whether they're scholastic. So how on earth am I going to get through this massive book that I found, which in this case is over 700 pages? How am I going to be able to go through something like this to use it for my research project? The answer to this question is to read strategically. Think about what is it in this book or any other book that I am actually trying to get out of it. Am I reading for content? Am I looking for background information? Am I thinking about a specific period versus any other? Basically, we can use the structure of a book to better find more quickly and more efficiently the content that we need for our papers. So let's take a look at an actual book. This is the same one that I just held up a moment ago, Richard Evans' The Third Reich in Power, very famous kind of overview of Nazi Germany, especially in the years before World War II. If we open this book, we will immediately find something called the Table of Contents. And this is kind of like a guide to all of the information in the book. If I am writing a paper about Nazi Germany, therefore, and I want to focus on a particular aspect of it, I can use the chapter headings and subheadings to narrow my search down. If I am writing about the Night of the Long Knives and the murder of several members of Hitler's entourage by Hitler in 1934, I can just skip right to this section and read all about this. I can read about Ernst Röhm. I can read about others as well, alternatives, in fact, to Hitler within the Nazi Party. If I am writing a paper about the history of religion and Nazism, I really don't need to spend a lot of time learning about the police state. I can just skip right ahead here to Chapter 3, Converting the Soul, and I can read about Catholics. I can read about other issues related to faith, Protestantism, etc. Another helpful device is the index, which you'll be able to find at the back of basically any academically written book. The index lists various institutions, individuals, events, etc., that allows the reader to focus on that particular page or that particular subject. If, for example, I was writing something about the history of Nazi Germany, but I was focusing on Rudolf Höss, who was the commandant at Auschwitz, I could look at this section, 82, 83, 84, 85. That would be a very, very rich sort of area to look at, and then again on 255 to see where he is mentioned. I don't need to read all the rest of the book if that is the exact thing that I am trying to write about. Similarly, right, if I'm talking about art, I could comb through and look for various sections that seem to be about art. This mention on 181, this might be fairly small. It might not be that helpful. Other sections where again they keep using the same terms over and over again, those might be more useful to me. But basically what I'm saying here is that you can use the index to get a sense of where the information in the book is that you are specifically looking for. You don't have to read through all 700 pages. Eureka! Finally, the last major piece of a book that can help us understand what's in it and read more efficiently is going to be the introduction. Introductions, especially in academic books, lay out the entire argument of the book. And sometimes when we read a book, we're really not so interested in the specific details, but we really just want to know what is the author's take on history? What is the major argumentative or interpretive position that they've taken? Any good academic book will lay this out in the introduction. The book should also talk about historiography, what other similar or competing books might have said about the subject, and it should also lay out, in a broad sense, what is in the book. What are the various chapters, and what do those chapters actually talk about? Sometimes it's not very clear what a chapter is actually about based on the title of it, right? Historians, other academics, we like to get kind of creative sometimes, and that makes it hard to tell what's going on. All right. I hope you found this discussion of how to read and find sources for your research paper useful. If you have questions about particular approaches or subjects, feel free to leave them in the comments section below, and I'll answer them as best I can. In the meantime, feel free to look at other videos that we make on topics like how to write and argue effectively, or check out my podcast on the history of modern Europe called History Off the Page. I'll leave a link to it in the description section below, but you can also find it on any major streaming service such as Spotify or iTunes or Google Podcasts. That's all for now. Good luck with your projects, and see you next time.